Good evening. Welcome to another episode of The Secret Life of Kings. Today, we're going to be looking at who many claim to be the most evil king of Israel. What did he do to earn this name? How true is this? We travel far and wide to interview many people close to this man, or megalomaniac. Today, we present to you the life of Ahab. The year is 874 BC, and Ahab, son of Omri, becomes king of Israel. The kingdom of Israel is the northern region of Israel after the split, and at times is also known as the kingdom of Samaria. King Asa is ruling over Judah. During this time, Heel from Bethel begins to rebuild the walls and city of Jericho. To do this, though, he sacrifices his two sons, Abiram and Segud. It's a brutal time in history. To hear more, let's hear from our first guest. Some would call him the greatest prophet of all time, Elijah. Take it away.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you. Thank you. I am Elijah. Well, you got to know this. This was a time of a lot of conflict, war, and instability. I mean, the split only happened so many years ago. God had me in Israel, aka Samaria, and which I get why. If you're going to assign the greatest prophet of all time, send him where he's most needed. But also serving Israel instead of Judah kind of sucked because Israel basically had bad king after bad king after bad king. Well, our brothers in the south and Judah had a few good apples in there. But yeah, there was war and a power struggle between Israel and Judah and the other nations. I guess I'd say Ahab's leadership appears to reflect this era. Everybody kind of jostling for control and trying to hold on to it however they can. And honestly, what really ticked God off, though, was Ahab's commitment to worshiping Baal. Like kings of the surrounding nations, many thought worshiping their gods would grant them more control of the region. And not even 1 year into Ahab's reign, he sets up the altar of Baal. And God sends me, as usual. I told Ahab, listen, the big guy upstairs is pretty ticked off. As a result, you get no water, no dew, nothing of the sort except at the word of God. But our guy isn't the best of listeners.
Thanks, Elijah. Definitely, Ahab was not the best of listeners, unless it was to his wife, Jezebel. He lets her do as she pleases, and it's almost as if she becomes the default spiritual leader for the nation. And what'd she do? Her devotion to Baal meant animosity toward Yahweh and all of his priests. She starts a campaign to kill all of the Lord's prophets, but the palace administrator, Obadiah, loved and served the Lord. He circumvented her plans by hiding away 100 prophets and providing these spiritual refugees with food and water, which was very scarce at the time because literally there had been nearly 3 years of no rain. We're now joined by Obadiah, a prophet and palace administrator. He will share about that time and what he remembers. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Listen, it was hard times under Ahab. What can I say about the guy that won't get me killed? He certainly committed hard worshiping Baal, but he also didn't completely reject God either. It's almost like he had 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And then we didn't have rain for 3 years. With the drought came a famine. And King Ahab called me up to have me carry out a rescue plan. I mean, he could have turned back to God and not let his wife commit mass genocide. But you know, he's a king. What can you do? I mean, besides saving 100 prophets, finding them the best caves, and sending them food without the royals knowing. So Ahab's plan was for us to check out every water source and see if there's grass and vegetation, and maybe that would keep our horses and donkeys alive a little bit longer. So he goes off in one direction, and I go off in the other. I guess it was nice he didn't stay in the palace and came out himself. But then the craziest thing happened to me. The greatest prophet of all time, Elijah, shows up. Oh my gosh, what an honor. It really was. I'm a bit of a fan. But then Elijah, for whatever reason, wanted me to tell Ahab that Elijah wanted to see him. If there's one thing I know about Ahab, he hated Elijah. He called him all sorts of names. One I will not even repeat here, but I can share some. He called Elijah the troubler of Israel and my sworn enemy. Ahab spent months going from town to town trying to find Elijah and kill him. And when Elijah didn't turn up, He made every city leader swear on point of death that they weren't hiding him. Imagine me going to Ahab and saying, Elijah's here now. And then what if Elijah doesn't show up? Listen, I want to meet my maker, but not like this. I reminded Elijah of the people I saved, and I asked him, why would God do this to me? Why would he want me to die like that? What did I do wrong? But Elijah swore to me that he'd show up. And you know what? He really did. He showed up.
Thanks, Obadiah. What follows is probably the most famous or infamous, depending on who you ask, story of Elijah's life. The servants of Baal and verse Elijah in a contest of gods to see who could rain down fire. This fiery showdown had a lot of symbolic importance, as Baal was understood by the Canaanites to be a weather god, often the one who governed the rain. In a region that didn't use irrigation, the people were dependent on rainfall and the weather for its agricultural growth. So, the mighty show of Yahweh to both rain down fire and then rain down rain ultimately proved Yahweh's supremacy over Baal. Of course, this event also meant the roundup and killing of 450 priests of Baal, which left Jezebel not too happy and on a quest for revenge against Elijah. Mass killings, warfare, genocide, these were the tools of the people of this time to try and exert power over one another. We're now joined by Jezebel herself to share her side of the story.
Okay, first of all, rude. It's Queen Jezebel, okay? And for the record, I super resent that he's called the most evil king of all Israel. Classic case of a man getting credit for a woman's work. I mean, hobby is great. That's what I call him. But he's kind of a coward. He let Elijah kill 450 of my people. My people. Of course, I try to take care of business and take him out. Well, that's hobby for you, cowardly. Let Naboth keep the vineyard until I step in. Let Elijah go on and escape to Mount Carmel. Honestly, what got hobby killed was that he was afraid he'd be targeted, so he pretended to be somebody else. If it were me, I'd show up in my full glory. But do I get credit for my work? Of course not. Also, what's up with the word evil? Like, I'm sorry if murdering my way to power somehow seems immoral or evil to you, but how else is a girl supposed to eat around here? I'm just doing what my daddy taught me to do. You can look him up. Ethbaal, the king of the Tyrians. Daddy took the throne by assassinating King Phyllis, and suddenly I was a princess. What's not to love? So yes, I campaigned to have Ahab convert his whole country to be followers of Baal. Look, following Baal worked out pretty well for me. Why wouldn't I want to share that power? And we're all just trying to survive out here. Think about where we live. It's a dog-eat-dog world out here, and I super hate that saying because I hate dogs. Ew.
Yes, thanks for that, Jezebel. The vineyard of Naboth was certainly a turning point for Ahab. It perhaps captures the depths of his depravity, measured by how callously he accepts the suffering and murdering of the innocent. Ahab saw a neighboring vineyard, and he wanted it. When Naboth, whose ancestors had owned the land for generations, refused to sell the land to Ahab, Ahab sulked until Jezebel organized an elaborate assassination plot so Ahab could have this land. Even though King Ahab did not orchestrate the assassination, he certainly allowed for it, and then benefited from it, and then saw the entire transaction as simply business. To really get you this voice, we obtained press passes to visit the afterlife, and are thrilled to have Naboth join us today. For the record, we attempted the same for King Ahab, but the legal team advised against it.
Thank you for having me. Before I begin, I must state on the record, in accordance with the non-disclosure agreement I signed, that I am not at liberty to disclose any of the details surrounding the afterlife. It's a distant memory now, but I'll share what I can recall. The king was really insistent on buying my family's vineyard, willing to give me the best vineyards of all Samaria, but it's not mine to give. The law forbids me from selling it, and I am a man of God and of the law. The land was the inheritance of my ancestors, and we were its caretakers, and it took care of us. I am told that King Ahab was so devastated by my response, he refused to eat for days, like a sulling child. During a day of fasting, that's when two scoundrels I have never seen before falsely accused me of cursing both God and king. No trial, no defense, nothing. Seems like lies are always hurled before stones are. But God is just. God sent Elijah to once again meet King Ahab, where God made a sacred promise of justice. the very dog that licked my blood would do the same for both King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. He vowed to cut off King Ahab's line with him. I am not a significant man, and yet God sent the greatest prophet of all time to call King Ahab out. It means a lot to me, that the transgression against me mattered as much to God as the widespread idolatry of the land under King Ahab's rule. That's Yahweh, you see, both big and small, and he sends his people to intervene and right the wrongs.
Thank you, Naboth, and thank you for coming all the way here to give us your story. As mentioned before, Naboth Vineyard was clear proof that King Ahab's depravity, but like all things, it's never just a single story. King Ahab humbled himself, tearing his clothes and donning a sackcloth and fasting. Classic rituals of lamentation and repentance. His anguish and sorrow were real, though it's hard to say if he truly saw the evil he'd done or he was just pained over the promised doom. Either way, God noticed and relented, declaring that the destruction of King Ahab's children would come after his death. We are actually besides ourselves today to have on record to talk about King Ahab, the holy God himself, Yahweh.
Thank you for having me. What can I say about my son Ahab? His actions as king grieve my heart more deeply than any other king of Israel. He craved control, recognition, and power, and he sought it regardless of blood spilled and of who he worshipped. But was he a violator of my law and my people, or a victim of his time and desires? Like all of my people, he was both. Ahab had brief moments of turning, but they were brief, and under his rule, so many of my people suffered. It's their cries I hear the most, that move me the most, and I send Moses, Elijah, and finally myself. My people are made for shalom, wholeness, and completeness. It's harmony in their relationship with me, each other, and the land I've gifted them.
Thank you. We are humbled and honored to enjoy a direct interview on tape. We did reach out to Ahab's team, but they got back with no comment from the afterlife. As we sit here and consider the man behind the title, the most evil king of Israel, we reflect on ways we continue to see such evil continue on in contemporary times. Today, with climate change, consequential droughts, and climate refugees, with politicians and leaders who hurl lies to pave an easy road towards violence and conquest, and in landlocked conflict, instability, and warfare, where cries of anguish and sorrow are still being heard by God today. What does it say when generations later continue on in the actions of the most evil king? And as we close out our segment on the life of Ahab, we may remember the hope we have in a God who listens, a God who sends, a God who comes, and a God who reminds us we are created for shalom. Thank you.
Excuse me, narrator. Before I go back to the afterlife, I have one small request. I've been here quite a bit, maybe over 3,000 years. Can I request your listeners to ring a bell since I have not gotten my wings yet? Thank you so much.
Everyone heard that, right? Thank you. Good night.